Hi there folks, I'm standing here in front of this white wall of blossoming wild plums here in the microforest by the bottom edge of our plot. And while this is a beautiful sight, there are a few very interesting and unusual aspects to it, which I'll talk about in this video. This year we've had the warmest January and February and the driest start of the year, I think, on official record. So those wild plums have blossomed maybe a week to 10 days before the earliest previous year, which was 2019. And I'll try to include a photo here so you can see and compare the stages of flowering. This is March the 22nd, and the previous record was on March the 31st, so easily a week earlier, and they are already in full bloom. The usual time for those wild trees to flower is maybe the mid-April, 15th of April, but the recent years the climate change drastically shifts the blooming period. Sadly, it does not really prevent us from having frosts. Now, just close by on this wild plum, I have grafted several different species and varieties, and you can see that some of the cultivated cherry plums here have not yet opened their buds because they're later flowering, which is good in this case. But this apricot here, which is supposed to be a later variety, has already bloomed last week, and you can see that the flowers have been frost damaged. I apologize for the phone not focusing. Now, the browning of the petals is a good indication of some frost happening, and you can see here as well how the petals have been browned, but that's not always a guarantee that the fruit set will be, the flower will be aborted and there will be no fruit set, because sometimes in a lighter frost like -2 degrees Celsius, the tips of the petals can be damaged, but the most important part of the reproductive organs in here are intact and they still manage to set fruit. I will try to focus here on this flower so you can see that right in the middle, this brown little line, which is the pistil, it should be bright white, and it's been frost damaged and killed, so it's now impossible for this fruit to be pollinated, for this flower and to set fruit. And here on this flower on the next branch, you can see that the pistil is intact. Here in the middle it's white, it's not brown. So even on the same tree of the same variety, sometimes you get flowers with different resistance. Another good thing is that some of the trees bud out in a few waves, so not all of the tree blooms at the same time, so you get those secondary buds which are not yet open, and there is still a chance for them to flower and not be killed by a later frost. Another variety of apricot nearby, and you can see that here the damage is more pronounced. More of the petals are brownish, and more of the pistils are dead as well, such as this one, very clearly visible here in the middle. Okay, so now comes the hard part, focusing in macro distances. We're here at this wild plum which I have grafted with many different experimental species and varieties. This is one of them. The names are not of actual importance. It's a type of plum, and you can see that, of course, the plums being more susceptible to frost. All of the flowers which I inspected along those branches and up here are killed by the frost. Here, right in the middle of this one, you can probably see that there is no living pistil, but that's just part of the problem, because I opened a few of the not really budded out flowers, such as this one here, and even in that stage, here in the center, you can see that there is this little tiny dark line, which is the cute pistil. So even not really bloomed flowers such as those one are frost damage before they open, and you need to have flowers at way earlier stage of development, such as those, to have a bigger chance of survival. Another thing to consider is microclimate. This young wild plum was also grafted on 3 different branches, and it's very similar to the one which I showed you over there, but while that one is a bit more in the open, this one is sheltered below very tall walnut, another wild plum and elm tree and a mulberry around here. So it's kind of a undercover, under an umbrella, as we say here. And you can see that, hopefully you can see that the pistils of those flowers are intact here in the middle. So there is hope for fruit coming out of those grafts, which I did last year or the year before on this young and still growing wild plum. And this variety, even though it's more in the open, it's an older tree which I'm overgrafting with new varieties gradually, because the original did not live up to my expectations and high standards for taste. But you can see that it has some merit, because clearly visible here are the intact pistils. So even though some of the flowers are damaged on those massive clusters, you can see lots of them are still viable. So perfectly good chance of having fruit on this tree. And here's another example of an apricot, where one of the blooms, this one, was damaged by the frost here on the petals, and the pistil in the middle. You can see that where my thumb is pointing, there's a brown pistil in the middle, while the flowers on the same branch, even though they do suffer a bit of a petal damage, they have the pistils intact, so there is chance for those to develop. Now here under our big ash tree, we have this wild plum growing next to the kids' playground, and I have, of course, grafted it with several different varieties. And here again, the microclimate is favorable, because you can see that the flowers are intact. There is even almost no noticeable frost damage on the petals. They all look very healthy. And last year, when almost none of the trees down in the garden had any plums, this one had a relative abundance. So microclimate seems very important in our climate. And you can see here that this graft which I made last year, let me turn around, it's very much earlier in the development of the flowers. Most of them don't even show a white tip yet. So this will bloom in maybe 1 or 2 weeks, while this will be done by that moment. So this has clearly a higher chance of survival and setting fruit and I've done several grafts of that variety here on that branch and this as well, because this has the potential to be one of my favorite plums so far. We'll see if we manage to taste some this year. And this is the first open flower on our young Red Haven peach tree. It has lots of buds waiting to open, but luckily it's been dormant up to this point, and I'm very happy to report that the frost has not damaged the pistil on the open flower, so the closed buds have even bigger chance, and hopefully we'll be able to have amazing peaches this year as well. So I'm leaving you with this image of an apricot flower shower here under this apricot grafted on wild plum, which I deliberately left to grow naturally without much pruning to see what crown shape it will develop and if the higher branches will promote better resistance to frost. Sadly, much of the flowers have fallen, and I'm usually testing that by shaking the tree and seeing what happens. There are some unopened buds here up at the top, so we'll see how they'll develop in the season. I absolutely wouldn't mind if we didn't have any more hard frosts, but after a week of -2 to -4 degrees in the night and 15 in the day, I'm not optimistic, and it's not even April yet, and we've regularly had snow in April. So fingers crossed, and let's see what nature gives us to work with this season.